Imagine being crowned queen at 16, only to lose everything in 9 days. This is the story of Lady Jane Grey. A teenager thrust onto England's throne in 1553, not by choice, but by the schemes of those around her. Her reign was one of the shortest in history, and it ended in a tragedy that shocked a nation. Why did a brilliant young girl become a pawn in a deadly game of power? And how did her fleeting moment as queen lead to her execution? This tale of ambition, betrayal, and loss will grip you from start to finish. Stay with me, because Jane's story is one you won't forget. In 1553, England was a nation teetering on the edge of chaos. The death of King Henry VIII in 1547 had left a fractured realm. With his only son, Edward VI, ascending the throne at just 9 years old, England was caught in the throes of the Reformation, a religious upheaval that pitted Catholics against Protestants in a bitter struggle for the soul of the nation. Henry VIII had broken with the Pope to establish the Church of England, but his reforms were uneven, leaving a country divided. Catholics clung to the old faith, centered on Rome, while Protestants pushed for a purer, scripture-based religion. This wasn't just theology, it was politics, power, and survival, with noble families aligning themselves to either side, ready to kill or die for their beliefs. Edward VI, a fervent Protestant, ruled under the guidance of regents, including the powerful Duke of Northumberland, John Dudley. By 1553, Edward, now 15, was dying of a lung illness, likely tuberculosis. The question of succession loomed large. Henry VIII's will had named his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, as next in line. But Mary was a staunch Catholic, determined to restore papal authority, while Elizabeth, a Protestant, was still young and untested. The prospect of a Catholic queen terrified England's Protestant elite, who feared a return to Catholic dominance would undo their reforms and threaten their wealth and influence. Noble families, enriched by the dissolution of monasteries under Henry, had no intention of surrendering their gains. This was a time of intrigue and ambition, where the throne was a prize for the cunning. The court buzzed with plots, whispered alliances, and betrayals, as nobles maneuvered to secure their futures. Women, though often sidelined, were central to the succession game. Royal blood made them pawns or players in a patriarchal world. Life for ordinary Englishmen was grim. Harvests failed, inflation soared, and religious purges saw heretics burned at the stake. The average person, whether a farmer toiling in muddy fields or a merchant in London's crowded streets, lived in fear of war, plague, or the scaffold. Executions were public spectacles, and the Tower of London loomed as a symbol of royal wrath. Into this volatile world stepped Lady Jane Grey, a 16-year-old girl whose royal blood made her a target for ambition. The granddaughter of Henry VIII's sister, Jane was fourth in line to the throne, a distant but viable claimant. England's nobility, particularly the Protestant faction led by Northumberland, saw in her a malleable figure, queen they could control to preserve their power and faith. The stage was set for a dangerous gamble, to bypass Mary and Elizabeth and crown Jane. It's not for her own sake, but to secure a Protestant future. In this cauldron of religion, politics, and greed, Jane's fate was sealed before she ever wore the crown. Her brief reign a spark in a powder keg that would consume her. Lady Jane Grey was no ordinary teenager, though she never sought the spotlight that history thrust upon her. Born in 1537 to a noble family with royal blood, Jane was a quiet, bookish girl whose intelligence and piety made her both remarkable and vulnerable in the treacherous world of Tudor England. She was the eldest daughter of Henry Grey, Marquis of Dorset, and Frances Brandon, a granddaughter of Henry VII, which placed Jane fourth in line to the throne, a distant but dangerous claim. Raised in the rolling countryside of Leicestershire at Bradgate Park, Jane's early life was one of privilege tempered by discipline. Her parents were ambitious, their sights set on elevating the family status. But Jane herself dreamed of simpler things, studying ancient texts, debating theology, and living a life of quiet devotion. Jane was small and slight, with auburn hair and a pale complexion, her delicate features belying a fierce intellect. By age 10, she was fluent in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, could read Italian and French, and wrote letters that sparkled with wit and insight. Her tutors, some of the finest Protestant scholars of the day, praised her as a prodigy, comparing her to Erasmus for her grasp of classical literature. Jane's passion was Protestantism. Corresponded with leading theologians like Heinrich Bullinger in Zurich, and saw her faith as a beacon in a world of moral decay. Unlike the scheming nobles around her, Jane's ambition was intellectual. She wanted to understand God's word, not to wear a crown. Her upbringing, however, was far from idyllic. Jane's parents were stern, even cruel, enforcing strict obedience through physical punishment. She later wrote of being pinched and abused for minor infractions, her spirit bent under their expectations. They saw her as a tool for advancement, a bargaining chip in the marriage market that dominated noble life. At 12, Jane was sent to live in the household of Catherine Parr, Henry VIII's surviving widow, where she absorbed courtly manners and Protestant zeal. This exposure to the royal court, coupled with her lineage, made her a target for schemers like John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, who saw her as the key to a Protestant dynasty. In 1553, at 16, Jane's life took a fateful turn. She was married off to Guildford Dudley, Northumberland's son, in a lavish ceremony that masked its political purpose. Jane, reluctant and tearful, had little say in the match. She was a pawn in her parents' and Northumberland's ambitions. Guildford, a handsome but spoiled youth, was no match for Jane's intellect, and their marriage was strained from the start. Jane preferred her books to her husband's company, finding solace in prayer and study. Yet, her royal blood and Protestant convictions made her the perfect figurehead for a desperate plan. With King Edward VI dying and the Catholic Mary Tudor next in line, Northumberland orchestrated a coup to place Jane on the throne, bypassing Mary and Elizabeth to secure a Protestant England. Jane was no warrior or politician. She was a scholar, a girl who quoted Plato and prayed for peace. Friends described her as gentle but resolute, her voice soft, but her convictions ironclad. She had no thirst for power. When told of her impending queenship, she reportedly wept, saying she was unfit and unwilling. Yet duty and faith compelled her to obey, believing her role was God's will. Her world was one of candlelit study rooms and fervent prayers, not the cutthroat politics of the Tudor court. She loved music, playing the lute with delicate fingers, and wrote poetry that mourned the world's injustices. Her letters reveal a teenager wise beyond her years, wrestling with questions of fate and divine purpose. The England of 1553 offered little mercy for someone like Jane. Women, even noble ones, were expected to be silent and obedient, their value tied to marriage and lineage. Jane's brilliance was both her strength and her curse, and her corset made her valuable to men like Northumberland, but marked her as a threat to others. Like Mary, as she was dressed in royal robes and led to the throne, Jane carried the weight of a nation's divisions. She was a Protestant hope, a noble pawn, a girl who loved learning more than power, but history cared only for her bloodline. Her 9-day reign was not her choice, but her courage in facing it, and the tragedy that followed, would make her a figure both pitied and admired, a fleeting queen whose life was as brilliant as it was brief. In the summer of 1553, England stood on a knife's edge, its future hanging by a thread as King Edward VI lay dying in Greenwich Palace. The 15-year-old king, frail from a wasting illness, was the last hope of a Protestant England forged by his father, Henry VIII. With no heirs of his own, Edward's death would pass the crown to his Catholic half-sister. Mary Tudor, a prospect that terrified the Protestant nobility. Into this cauldron of fear and ambition stepped Lady Jane Grey, a 16-year-old scholar who wanted nothing to do with the throne. Her 9-day reign, a fleeting moment between July 10th and July 19th, 1553, was the turning point of her life, a whirlwind of manipulation, power, and betrayal that propelled her from obscurity to queenship, and ultimately to the scaffold. The plot to crown Jane began months earlier, orchestrated by John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, the most powerful man in Edward's court. Northumberland, a ruthless opportunist, saw Mary's Catholic faith as a threat to his influence and the Protestant reforms that enriched his allies. Edward, devoutly Protestant, shared these fears, haunted by visions of England returning to papal rule. In June 1553, as his health deteriorated, Edward was persuaded to draft a device for the succession, a document bypassing his sisters, Mary and Elizabeth, in favor of Jane, his Protestant cousin. The document, legally dubious, was Northumberland's masterstroke, exploiting Edward's zeal to secure his own power. Jane, recently married to Northumberland's son Guildford, was the perfect pawn royal by blood, Protestant by conviction, and young enough to be controlled. On July 6, 1553, Edward died, his lungs ravaged. His last words a prayer for England's Protestant future. The court moved swiftly to conceal his death, buying time for Northumberland's coup. Jane, unaware of the full plot, was summoned to Sion House, a grand estate on the Thames. There, on July 9th, she was met by a grim assembly of nobles, including her parents and Northumberland. They knelt before her, proclaiming her queen by Edward's will. Jane, pale and trembling, collapsed in tears, protesting her unworthiness. "I am not fit to rule," she said, her voice shaking, "and the crown is rightfully Mary's." But her pleas were ignored. Duty and pressure forced her to accept. The next day, July 10th, she was rowed to the Tower of London, not as a prisoner, but as a queen dressed in green velvet, her small frame dwarfed by the weight of the crown. Jane's reign began with a flurry of proclamations declaring her queen, sent to every corner of England. Coins were minted in her name, and church bells rang, though many rang hollow. The people, weary from years of religious upheaval, were skeptical. Mary, the rightful heir by Henry VIII's will, was popular among Catholics and even some Protestants, who saw her as Henry's true daughter. Meanwhile, Jane, cloistered in the Tower, tried to govern. She issued orders, signed documents, and refused to crown Guildford as king. Showing a flicker of defiance against Northumberland's overreach, her intelligence shone through. She debated policy with advisors. Her Latin phrases crisp and confident, but her heart wasn't in it. She wrote to friends, confessing her fear, her prayers filled with pleas for guidance. Trouble brewed beyond London's walls. Mary, alerted to the coup, fled to East Anglia, rallying supporters under her banner. Nobles, soldiers, and commoners flocked to her, driven by loyalty and distrust of Northumberland's ambition. By July 12th, Mary's forces were growing, her letters denouncing Jane as a usurper spreading like wildfire. Northumberland, underestimating Mary's resolve, led an army to confront her. Leaving Jane vulnerable in the Tower, the council, sensing the tide turning, began to waver. Jane, unaware of the crumbling support, continued her duties, her faith, her only anchor. She was a queen in name, but a prisoner of circumstance, her every move dictated by men who saw her as a means to an end. The turning point came swiftly. On July 19th, just 9 days after her proclamation, the Privy Council betrayed Jane, with Mary's army closing in and public support collapsing. The councillors declared Mary the rightful queen. Bells rang out for Mary, and Jane's banners were torn down. Northumberland's forces melted away, his own men turning against him. Jane was summoned from the royal apartments in the Tower to a smaller chamber, her queenship dissolved in an instant. She accepted the news with quiet resignation, reportedly saying the crown was never mine to keep. Her parents and husband were arrested, and Jane, now a traitor in the eyes of the law, awaited her fate. This 9-day reign was the pivot of Jane's life, a fleeting moment when history thrust her into a role she neither sought nor wanted. It exposed the brutality of Tudor politics, where bloodlines and beliefs turned a teenage girl into a sacrificial pawn. Jane's brief queenship was not a triumph but a tragedy, the prelude to her final act. As Mary marched to claim her throne, Jane's world shrank to the cold stone walls of the Tower. Her brilliance and piety no match for the forces that had used her and would soon discard her. The fall of Lady Jane Grey's 9-day reign in July 1553 marked the beginning of a harrowing struggle. It's not for power, but for survival in a world that had used her and cast her aside. At just 16, Jane found herself imprisoned in the Tower of London. No longer a queen, but a traitor in the eyes of the new monarch, Mary I. The weight of her brief queenship pressed down on her. A crushing reminder of the ambitions of others. Northumberland, her parents, the Protestant elite that had thrust her into a deadly spotlight. Her story from July 1553 to her execution in February 1554 is one of resilience, faith, and quiet defiance, as she faced betrayal, isolation, and the looming shadow of the scaffold in a court consumed by vengeance and religious fervor. Jane's imprisonment began the moment her reign collapsed on July 19, 1553, stripped of her royal robes. She was confined to the gentleman jailer's lodgings in the Tower, a modest set of rooms far from the grandeur of the royal apartments. Her husband, Guildford Dudley, was locked in a separate cell, as were her father, Henry Grey, and other conspirators. The Tower, once her seat as queen, became her prison, its damp stone walls and narrow windows a constant reminder of her fall. Jane's days were spent in solitude. Her only companions, her books, her prayers, and the occasional visit from a sympathetic guard. She wrote letters, some to her family, others to Protestant scholars abroad, pouring her heart into words that blended fear with unyielding faith. "I am in God's hands," she wrote to her sister Catherine, "and His will shall guide me, though I walk through the valley of death." Outside the Tower, England was transforming under Mary I's Catholic restoration. Mary, now 37, entered London in triumph, greeted by cheering crowds weary of political chaos. Her mission was clear: to undo the Protestant reforms of her father and brother, restoring Catholicism as England's faith. But her path was fraught with challenges. Protestant nobles, fearing persecution, plotted against her, while Catholic hardliners demanded swift justice for the usurpers who had crowned Jane. Mary, though devout, was not initially vengeful. She hesitated to execute Jane. Her cousin, recognizing her as a pawn rather than a mastermind. Yet political pressure and her own insecurities as a female monarch in a male-dominated world pushed her toward severity. The Duke of Northumberland, the architect of Jane's queenship, was beheaded in August 1553, his pleas for mercy ignored. Jane's fate hung in the balance, her life dependent on Mary's mercy and the volatile politics of the court. Jane's struggle was not just physical, but emotional and spiritual. Isolated from her family, she grappled with betrayal. Her parents had pushed her into the marriage with Guildford and the plot for the throne, yet now they distanced themselves, pleading for Mary's favor to save their own necks. Guildford, imprisoned nearby, sent her desperate letters, but their strained marriage offered little comfort. Jane's greatest solace was her faith. She spent hours reading the Bible and writing theological treatises, her quill scratching late into the night. Her writings reveal a mind wrestling with fate. She questioned why God had placed her in such a trial, yet accepted it as a test of her soul. "If I must die," she wrote to a friend, "let it be for truth, not ambition." Her Protestant convictions grew fiercer, a quiet rebellion against the Catholic tide sweeping England. The conflict escalated in early 1554, when Jane's father, Henry Grey, made a fatal mistake. Released from the Tower after swearing loyalty to Mary, he joined Wyatt's rebellion, a Protestant uprising aimed at deposing the Queen and preventing her marriage to the Catholic Philip II of Spain. The rebellion, named after its leader Thomas Wyatt, saw thousands march on London, fueled by fears of Spanish domination and Catholic persecution. The revolt failed, crushed by Mary's forces, but it sealed Jane's doom. Mary's advisors, led by the Catholic Bishop Stephen Gardiner, argued that Jane, though uninvolved, remained a dangerous symbol for Protestant rebels. Her royal blood made her a rallying point, a threat that could not be ignored. In February 1554, Mary reluctantly signed Jane's death warrant, along with Guildford's, her hand trembling as she did so. Jane's final days were a testament to her resilience. Informed of her execution date, February 12, 1554, she faced it with remarkable composure. She wrote a poignant letter to her father forgiving his role in her downfall, though it hath pleased God to hasten my death by you, by whom my life should rather have been lengthened, yet I can willingly forego it. She refused to convert to Catholicism, even when offered a chance to save her life, her faith an unbreakable shield. To her sister Catherine, she bequeathed a Greek New Testament, inscribed with a message urging steadfastness and belief. Jane also composed her own epitaph, a prayer that her death would glorify God, her words calm yet piercing in their clarity. The execution was a public spectacle, designed to deter rebellion. On February 12th, Jane watched from her cell as Guildford was beheaded on Tower Hill, his cries faint but haunting. She was led to the scaffold within the tower's walls, a private execution reserved for those of royal blood. Dressed in black, her prayer book in hand, she addressed the small crowd with steady resolve. "I do wash my hands in innocence," she declared, denying any treasonous intent. Blindfolded, she struggled to find the block, whispering, "What shall I do? Where is it?" A bystander guided her, and with a final prayer, she laid her head down. The axe fell, ending the life of a girl who had been queen for 9 days, her blood soaking the straw as onlookers wept. Jane's struggle was over, but its ripples lingered. Her execution shocked England, hardening Protestant resolve and fueling anti-Catholic sentiment. Mary's reign meant to unify, instead, deepened divisions, her harsh policies earning her the nickname Bloody Mary.
Ow.
Jane's death became a martyr's tale, her writings published posthumously to inspire Protestant resistance. For those who knew her, like her tutors and sisters, the loss was personal, brilliant mind extinguished by the cruelty of politics.
Yes.
Jane's story is one of survival against impossible odds, not of life, but of spirit, her courage in the face of betrayal and death, a quiet defiance that outlasted her brief, tragic queenship. The execution of Lady Jane Grey on February 12, 1554, marked the end of her tragic arc, but its impact rippled through England and beyond, shaping the narrative of a nation grappling with religion, power, and memory. At just 16, Jane's life was extinguished, her 9-day reign reduced to a footnote in the turbulent reign of Mary I, yet her death was not the end of her story. It became a rallying cry for Protestants, a symbol of martyrdom, and a cautionary tale of how ambition and politics can crush the innocent. The outcome of Jane's brief queenship was not just her demise, but a complex legacy celebrated by some, erased by others, and rediscovered centuries later as a testament to resilience and sacrifice. In the immediate aftermath, England under Mary I turned sharply toward Catholicism. Mary, crowned in July 1553, moved swiftly to restore the old faith, reinstating Catholic bishops, reviving the Mass, and aligning with Spain through her marriage to Philip II. Jane's execution, alongside her husband Guildford Dudley and other conspirators, was meant to cement Mary's authority and deter Protestant rebellion. But the opposite happened. The public execution of a teenage girl, known for her piety and intellect, shocked even those who supported Mary. Chroniclers like John Foxe, in his Book of Martyrs 1563, immortalized Jane as a Protestant saint, detailing her courage and faith in the face of death. Her final words, her refusal to convert, and her poignant letters were published across Europe, fueling anti-Catholic sentiment and galvanizing Protestant resistance in England and abroad. Jane's family faced varied fates. Her father, Henry Grey, was executed shortly after Jane for his role in Wyatt's rebellion, his ambition costing him his daughter and his life. Her mother, Frances Brandon, escaped punishment by swearing loyalty to Mary, later remarrying and fading into obscurity. Jane's sisters, Catherine and Mary, lived under suspicion, their royal blood a constant threat in a court wary of rivals. The Grey family's name, once poised for greatness, became synonymous with tragedy, their role in Jane's rise and fall a source of shame. Guildford's family, the Dudleys, also suffered. John Dudley's execution in 1553 left them disgraced, though his sons, including Robert Dudley, later rose to prominence under Elizabeth I in Mary's England. Jane's memory was deliberately suppressed. Official records referred to her as a usurper, her brief reign erased from state chronicles to legitimize Mary's rule. Catholic propagandists dismissed her as a puppet of greedy nobles, her intellectual brilliance ignored in favor of narratives that praised Mary's divine right. Yet, among Protestant communities, Jane's story thrived in secret. Pamphlets circulated her writings, her letter to her sister inscribed in a New Testament becoming a cherished relic. Exiled Protestants in Geneva and Frankfurt hailed her as a martyr, her execution proof of Catholic tyranny. This underground veneration kept Jane's name alive, even as Mary's regime sought to bury it. When Elizabeth I ascended in 1558 after Mary's death, Jane's legacy was partially rehabilitated. Elizabeth, a Protestant, distanced herself from Jane's story, to avoid highlighting the fragility of royal succession. But Protestant historians like Fox ensured Jane's place in the narrative of England's Reformation. Her story became a cautionary tale of political overreach, a reminder that even royal blood could not shield the innocent from the axe. Yet outside Protestant circles, Jane faded into obscurity. The broader historical record, focused on monarchs like Henry VIII, Mary, and Elizabeth, relegated her to a minor role, 9 days overshadowed by longer reigns and larger battles. Jane's erasure was not total, however. The centuries that followed, her story resurfaced in literature and art. Victorian historians, drawn to tales of tragic heroines, romanticized Jane as the 9 Days Queen, emphasizing her youth and piety over her political significance. Paintings depicted her as a delicate martyr, her auburn hair glowing under a halo of innocence. In the 19th century, her writings were rediscovered, revealing a mind of astonishing depth. Her letters and prayers translated anew, earning admiration from scholars, who saw her as a proto-feminist figure, a woman whose intellect defied the constraints of her time. Yet popular history often reduced her to a victim, overlooking her agency and clinging to her faith and facing death with courage. Today, Jane's story resonates as a reminder of how history discards those who serve as pawns in greater games. In modern England, she is commemorated modestly. A plaque in the Tower of London marks her execution site, and historical novels like Alison Weir's Innocent Traitor revive her tale for new audiences. Academic studies explore her as a symbol of the Reformation's cost, her life a lens into the brutal intersection of gender, religion, and power. Tourists visiting the tower pause at her story, moved by the image of a teenage girl who faced the scaffold with a prayer book in hand. In contrast, Mary's reign, tarnished by her persecution of Protestants, casts Jane as a foil figure of purity against Bloody Mary's infamy. The outcome of Jane's life was not just her death, but the enduring question of what might have been. Had she ruled longer, could her intellect have shaped a different England? Her erasure from mainstream history reflects the fate of many used and discarded women, idealists, those caught in the crossfire of ambition. Yet her recognition as a martyr and scholar endures, a testament to her refusal to bend even in the face of death. Jane's story, though brief, burns brightly in the shadows of history, a reminder that even the forgotten can leave a mark. Lady Jane Grey's life was a fleeting spark in the storm of Tudor England, a 16-year-old girl crowned queen for 9 days, only to be sacrificed on the altar of ambition and faith. Her story is not just a tragedy, but a mirror held up to history, revealing how power devours the innocent. Jane was no warrior or schemer. She was a scholar, her heart set on books and God, yet she was thrust into a role she never sought. Her courage in facing betrayal, imprisonment, and the axe shines as a testament to the strength of conviction over circumstance. In a world that valued her bloodline over her mind, she stood firm, her final words a prayer for truth, not power. This tale forces us to confront a hard truth. History often forgets those used and discarded pawns like Jane, whose lives are collateral in the games of the powerful. Her 9 days as queen were a flicker, but her resilience echoes across centuries, reminding us of the human cost behind crowns and coups. Today, as we navigate our own battles of ideology and ambition, Jane's story urges us to question who pays the price for others' greed. "I die a true Christian," she said, blindfolded on the scaffold, her voice steady. "I'll let her courage inspire us to value integrity over glory and to remember the forgotten whose stories shape our past." Lady Jane Grey's story, a teenager crowned queen for 9 days, only to face betrayal and execution, is a haunting reminder of how power can crush the innocent. Her courage and intellect shine through history's shadows, urging us to reflect on the human cost of ambition. If Jane's tale moved you, share it with someone who might find meaning in her sacrifice. Let's keep her memory alive, honoring those history too often forgets. For more stories of unsung heroes and forgotten tragedies, stick around, there's so much more to uncover.